think we don't. I think let me welcome once again the panelists for this session. We have Sri Siddharam Yechuriji, who is going to chair this session, and we have two panelists, Sri Jairam Rameshji and Sri D. Raja. I think first of all, on behalf of Gujarati Institute and all our colleagues, and especially our chairman, who actually designed this program, I must say, conceived this program, we welcome all of you, and we look forward to a tangible outcome. Because this is a time wherein seriously people are looking forward to the outcome of the deliberation. So we are very sure that we will have a much better, kind of understanding as well as pointed action points coming out of it. Thank you, Joy. Thank you for joining us. Over to Sri Siddharam Yechuriji.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you very much. And I'm very happy to have my co-panelists here. Of course, Tavarish Jairam Ramesh. I call him Tavarish because we have a long standing relationship between us, friendship. And Comrade Raja, of course, who's here with us. Well, I've been asked to chair this session because at any point of time in our history, fiscal federalism or federalism in the larger sense has always been a very important issue, very often a contentious issue, very often an issue in which all the opposition had to rally together demanding better interstate relations. All that apart, right now we are discussing this in the background of this pandemic. And this is a serious pandemic which has affected the whole world, and I think we need to take proper steps in order to both contain the pandemic and to ensure that the people's livelihoods are not disrupted beyond repair. These objectives need to be fulfilled, and if these have to be fulfilled, we have to recognize, the country has to recognize that it is the states and the state governments that are on the battlefront. They are at the front lines of this battle. And unless they are strengthened, it is not possible for us to succeed in this battle. Right now, I'm told, or today sometime, the Prime Minister is meeting with the Chief Ministers of the states. I'm also told, if this is true, it is very unfortunate that there is a short list of only 9 Chief Ministers who can be there for a limited amount of time. The other states will only be spectators. If that is the case, that will be very unfortunate. I think the Chief Ministers must and should, I'm sure, will articulate the cause for the state's position. And the important thing, the most essential thing, is if you want to strengthen the hands of the state governments in the battlefront, then we have to recognize that a large dose of financial assistance is required. And this is inevitable in the present context. And what the government has offered, this financial package of 1.7 lakh crores, this is a pittance, less than 1% of our GDP. And unless we immediately increase this to at least 5%, many countries in the world have gone up to 20%, 25%. But even if you begin with the 5% thing, going up to 10%, that would be the basic minimum required. Because what is the situation? Every state has reported, and today a survey has come, that the state finances are down by nearly 80%. There is no money to pay the salaries of government employees. And there is a forcible deduction of a day's salary for the PM CARES fund. Why this fund was set up, nobody knows. Why not the disaster relief fund, and why a special trust, non-auditable, non-accountable? Nobody knows that. Leave that aside. But what are the huge thousands of crores that have gone into this fund now? What are they going to be used for? They should immediately be dispersed to the states. Because what is the need for strengthening the fight against the pandemic? First of all, to protect our doctors and health workers, many of whom are succumbing to this virus. Secondly, we need to increase our testing tremendously. We are one of the lowest in terms of testing in the world. And I pointed out in a letter to the Prime Minister yesterday that it is very unfortunate that we are lower than even Pakistan in terms of testing. Now, unless we test properly and identify and isolate, and there, hats off to our Kerala government, because they have done a very, very meticulous job, a tremendous effort in isolating the hotspots, sealing them off, and containing this, like many other countries in the world have done, China, South Korea, Singapore. And that is the way we should proceed. For both these, you require funds. Then what is the plight of the people? Now, today, the Health Ministry has put out results of its survey that appear today, saying that 44% of the Indian people have curtailed their food intake. 44%. That is non-availability, fear, or hoarding, whatever it may be. But 44% of people going, into malnutrition is a very, very serious problem. And as far as the migrant labor is concerned, you announce a nationwide lockdown with a 4-hour notice, not giving time for either the people or the state governments to prepare, and now turn around, the central government says, now you take care of the migrants in your state. Central government will not fund. It is the states that have to do this job, which is not their making. If we had prepared for this lockdown and ensured the transportation available, we brought back Indians stranded abroad through special planes. Good. But why not special trains and buses, at least for the domestic migrant labor to go back to their homes? But that was not done. As a result, what is it? The survey itself shows that only 31% of these migrant workers, except in states like Kerala, only 31% of these migrant workers are receiving any assistance, financial or in terms of food. 69% of this migrant labor are going hungry. Can we afford to have a situation where there are more non-COVID deaths in our country than COVID deaths? We are being pushed into that direction. What is required, therefore, is to liberally assist the state governments, not only increase their borrowing in the ways and means accounts, yes, but that will eventually be a liability that the states will have to pay back. And given the fact that you curtailed almost all avenues for revenue raising by the states after the GST implementation and not returning the dues of the GST to the states, in this situation, starving the state governments means losing the battle against COVID. So immediately, while you fund the state government, the central government must, at least for the next 3 months, give 7,500 rupees to all the people with their bank accounts who are needy, who have lost their jobs. There is large-scale retrenchment. It is estimated now by the CMIE that nearly 14 crore people have lost their jobs since the lockdown began. 14 crores. If this is the situation, an immediate financial transfer is required, and for 3 months continuously, 7,500 to these people, and free distribution of food grains. You have now, today it's been declared that you have something like 7.7 crore tons of food grains in our godowns. This report appeared today. And your new harvest crop is coming in. What will you do with this entire stock? You immediately release it to the state government and release it free to the state government so that people can be fed. If we cannot take care of our people, then we are undermining our fight against COVID, because malnutrition and therefore associated fall in the immunity levels is the biggest culprit to allow COVID to strike human beings. So therefore, what I would suggest, and my co-panelists can also please enlighten us, that we should immediately, I think, on behalf of all the states, ask the central government to transfer the PM CARES fund to the states and to liberally finance the states in this battle, and to procure both your PPEs for the health workers and doctors and your testing equipment, and give immediate cash transfers, give immediate free supply of food to these people, and make arrangements immediately for the transportation of the migrant workers back home as soon as it can be done. And I think from the 3rd of May, or even before that, some relaxations have been given, this can be done. So this, in short, after we hear our eminent panelists, we will also continue with this discussion. But I think in short, the demand should be very clear. Liberally now fund state governments who are on the battlefront. And they need this funding. And their own resource mobilization has fallen by nearly 80%. And this, an increase our the fiscal package for fighting this pandemic from less than 1% of our GDP to at least 5% to start with, aiming to go up to 10%. And this way, we strengthen our battle against the COVID. So therefore, I would like, whether Jairam, you would like to join in now, or you want to hear Raja and then join in?
Yeah, Sitaram, good morning. Good to see you. Good to see Comrade Raja and others. I've been part of the first session also, so I'm going to be repeating myself a little. However, you have expanded the scope of the debate, and I am going to restrict myself only to issues relating to fiscal federalism. You have raised much larger issues, which even Mrs. Sonia Gandhi has taken up with the Prime Minister. Uh, Much larger issues of relief, immediate relief to large sections of our society. I'm going to keep that aside and I'm going to focus on what the Gulati Institute of this seminar, of this webinar, which is to focus on issues of fiscal federalism. I think it's very clear to me that as we emerge progressively out of this lockdown after the 3rd of May in a graduated manner, the architecture of fiscal federalism in our country is going to undergo a radical transformation. In the last 30 years, there has been a move towards greater political decentralization. States have got more powers from the center. However, most states have been unwilling to carry forward the decentralization to panchayats and nagar palikas. But broadly, the political decentralization has accompanied social empowerment on the one hand and economic liberalization on the other. My great fear is that political decentralization is going to take a huge knock, and we are going to see the forces of centralization emerge much stronger. The center is going to be far more pivotal than it ever was in our nation's recent history. I think this is the first long-term implication of the events of the last few weeks, which we have to be really cautious about, and we have to take preemptive action as a collective entity. Because I think one of the great lessons of this crisis is that political decentralization works, and political decentralization is far more preferable to a top-down command and control, tali bajao, diya jalao type of an approach. So I think on this, Sitaram, we need really to understand that fiscal federalism is going to take a knock. We have to be sure that we are in a position to deal with the inevitable clamor and movement towards greater and greater centralization of political and financial authority. Now, what should be done in the short term is, of course, our biggest concern. And I think in the short run, I see absolutely no alternative to increasing the FRBM ceiling. People have talked about it, people have speculated about it, but I think the time has come for us to recognize that without an increase in the FRBM ceiling, Hasib mentioned a figure of 5%. It could be 4.5%, it could be 5%, but it's certainly it cannot be the case that we can move ahead in a meaningful manner without a relaxation in the FRBM ceiling. The second issue is, I think, a ruthless review of capital expenditure. I take Thomas Isaac's point that it is capital expenditure spread over a period of time. but there are immediate implications to capital expenditure as well. Even in the budget that was presented on the 1st of February, that has been made completely irrelevant, there was provision for a very large capital expenditure that would fructify in 2020-21. And I think that capital expenditure has necessarily to be deferred and substituted by transfer payments to sections of society and, in fact, greater devolution to states. So I think the capital expenditure issue is something that we need to grapple with immediately. Thirdly, I see absolutely no alternative to the budget, to the government presenting a revised budget in the month of July, as it was done in 1991, as it was done most recently in 2014 as well. It was done in 2019 as well. I think the budget of February 2020 was based on extremely flawed and unrealistic assumptions. Now, of course, they're being made completely irrelevant. And I think that's the reason why I would argue that there has to be a clearer delineation of the budget and its architecture, revenue and expenditure, sometime in the middle of July by the government, central government, to be followed by the states. I think this is absolutely inevitable. I think there are a large number of other issues that were flagged by state finance ministers. What will happen to devolution? Hasib Drabu argued that there should be minimum guaranteed devolution to the states. And I find that an attractive proposition, that devolution should not fall below a certain minimum level. And in any case, the legitimate dues of the state governments, of which certainly GST compensation is very important, must be provided for on time so that the states are in a better position to deal with this crisis, both from a social point of view as well as an economic point of view. So I think the large number of issues, Sitaram, which we can all discuss on how to revive the economy, how to protect livelihoods, how to protect the interests of the migrant labor, particularly, and so on. But I think we are discussing issues of fiscal federalism, which is the relationship of center and states and the relationship of states with panchayats and nagarpalikas. There is a tendency in our country to look at fiscal federalism only from a center-state perspective. But I would say that it's not only a center-state perspective, but it's also a state panchayat nagarpalika perspective. So there are two dimensions to this fiscal federalism issue, which will come into fore. And I think in the long run, this is really what bothers me a lot. Let me share with you another concern that I have. When I look at all the remedies that are being given for economic revival, I find the standard remedies that were being given even before the pandemic crisis. Liberalize land acquisition laws, liberalize labor laws, liberalize environmental laws. These are standard, to use your language, Sitaram, these are the standard neo-lib orthodoxies, which have been propagated for decades. And it seems to me that, the clamor for this is going to increase because, we need to restore growth, we need to restore economic activity, and therefore, let's throw land acquisition law, environmental law, labor law, put them on the back burner for a while, and so on. I mean, these arguments are going to take place. We have to be very careful. I think for one, disagree with this approach. I think in many ways, and I have argued that in 1991, the necessity was that the state had to give way to greater private enterprise and private initiative. But I think in 2020, this crisis shows us that the state has to re-enter a smarter state, a more leaner state, a more focused state, has to re-enter, particularly in areas like health, which has to receive the absolute priority. There is no alternative to public investment and public expenditure, but current public systems of delivery are not going to deliver the goods from enhanced public investment, and that's, I think, we need to think about in the medium term. So, I mean, these are the initial comments I have, Sitaram, on the fiscal federalism issue, and I think we really need to be worried that the gains that we have had in the last 3 decades of greater fiscal and administrative and political decentralization are not lost and frittered away by a government which is just itching and waiting to centralize political, administrative, and financial authority.
Thank you. As always, I didn't want to interrupt you, but I mean, both of us have this tendency of interrupting each other. But I didn't want to interrupt you. But the session that we are talking of today is been titled by the Gulati Institute as the Pandemic and Fiscal Federalism. So, pandemic and the way to contain the pandemic, I thought was actually the topic that this session was talking about, the context and the way forward about the pandemic. So that is what I was focusing on, because on the larger issues of fiscal federalism, we have been through this debate for a long, long time, for nearly 2 decades now, and more than 2 decades, 3 decades now. And our position, the CPI's position, and what you're talking of, there's anybody who actually implemented even before the central law came of the Panchayati Raj. It was in West Bengal, Jyoti Bose did that. The people's planning process, if anybody did that, it was in Kerala, and it goes back to the 1950s, the vision of when the first communist government came. So we are on the same boat on that issue. And on the question of federalism at large, as said, and also fiscal federalism in particular, there have been debates, we've been through it. Gulati Institute, in fact, organized one earlier where Dr. Manmohan Singh inaugurated that, and I was also part of that. So, but I thought this was in the context of COVID, and what is the way forward in the context of COVID, and hence, therefore, my focus was on that. So that is the reason. Anyway, after the panelists intervene, then we can probably have a discussion on it. Now, Comrade Raja, will you take the floor?
Tavarish Jairam.
I'm a sheep between two lions here. I'm sheep between two lions here.
No. You wear your lion cloth very, very effectively, Jira. Whatever you may be.
For the welfare of the country. No, I broadly agree with the major issues which you and Tavarish Jairam flagged. In economy is sinking into deep crisis, and it is sick. Now we have new sickness called corona pandemic. So in this context, we discuss the question of fiscal federalism. Mass unemployment, hunger, and despair are the life of our people. Now we have to face this new pandemic crisis. So how we can face this? This brings us to the question of fiscal federalism. Federalism, of course, to be an issue since our independence. We keep discussing how to decentralize power, political power, economic power at all levels, how to ensure states should have adequate economic and political power. So we keep discussing. But in the present context, we need to discuss the fiscal federalism. I think there are some fundamental questions which remain there. Since 2014 onwards, we find a new assault on the very question of federalism, particularly fiscal federalism. The Planning Commission was established, and in its place, Niti Ayog has been constituted. Now, we have this Finance Commission 15th. How the center states are sharing the access. That is what we should discuss. In the context of pandemic, corona pandemic, the Tamil Nadu government has been asking more money. You refer to Kerala. I refer to Tamil Nadu also because the very Finance Commission, 15th Finance Commission, has recommended that Tamil Nadu should be given the revenue deficit grant of rupees 4,025, but they are not getting. Again, I can make another general point. The union government in its present budget for the year had recommended 30,000 crores against Finance Commission's recommendation of total grant of rupees 74,340 crores towards post devolution revenue deficit grants to the states. So that includes all states, Manipur to Maharashtra and Tamil Nadu to Jammu and Kashmir. But what is happening today? There is a tendency centralizing everything, and the center is taking over everything. We have talked about what is the budgetary allocation on public health. It is not even 2%. In fact, as you know, the left parties, CPI also demanded at least 6% of GDP should be spent on public health. That is not happening, less than 2%. And again, in the context of pandemic, I must say,
Some problem with audio. Some technical person could check.
Democracy is also under attack. How? I am saying the lockdown was announced.
Some problem.
Jaram, do you hear me?
We can hear you.
We
Go
are
ahead.
able to hear. Yeah.
Okay. The lockdown was announced by the Prime Minister, but was there proper consultation among the state governments? Was there adequate preparedness to go for such a lockdown? Why the government, the center behaved like that? This is what I'm questioning. The center should not grab all powers in its hand and should not think it can decide anything for the whole country when there are elected governments in all states, and the state governments will have to be taken into confidence, and they are the governments which are working on the ground containing this endemic, this pandemic crisis. So that is one point we should try to understand. You referred to Ms. Jairam, the GS, and I was in the Joint Parliamentary Committee which discussed GST. In fact, there is a dissent note given by me. But what is happening today? Why state governments are crying? They are not getting their due share from GST, and that is one issue which we need to discuss. Then there is a National Disaster Management Authority, and there is National Disaster Relief Fund. And what is this PM CARES? What is the purpose of PM CARES? Does it mean that PM should decide everything? PM is everything. This is what is undermining the federal principles of our country, particularly the fiscal principles of our country. And you are talking panchayats, municipalities should get adequate funds. Of course, we all agree. We all agree. But states must give adequate funds to the local bodies. But states should also get adequate funds from the center school. Is it happening? This is what we should understand, because there are many, and I need not repeat whatever Comrade Sitaram has said. The daily wage earners, the poor people, migrant laborers, how they suffer, why it should happen, that is there. But now we are discussing the question of redress of their concerns. In the context of this corona, we are discussing fiscal federalism. And here I think the question of uh, National Disaster Management Authority, Disaster Relief Fund, and the PM CARES. All this should be discussed in totality. What is this PM CARES? So far, nobody is able to understand what is the purpose of this fund, how this fund is distributed, how it is given to states or needy people. Nobody knows. Then this finance commission, what is the finance commission is doing? What are its recommendations? Why states are not getting their due despite recommendations of the finance commission? Then we should discuss the GST. Why states are uh, begging for their due from whatever council you got, GST council or anything. So these are certain fundamental questions we need to address. The present system cannot help to address the challenges that we face today, and we will have to think, and we cannot find solutions within the present structure. That is my point. We cannot find solutions within the present structures. We'll have to think of even structural changes, how we can share the powers among our states and center, among our states and center. This we are not able to discuss, and there is no opportunity to discuss. And if you discuss, your patriotism will be questioned. If you start questioning the government, your nationalism will be questioned. And that is what is happening today. So the pandemic, corona pandemic, has brought new questions, new challenges, and the financial difficulties will have to be discussed. In that context, the federalism or fiscal federalism, whatever you may call, that needs to be discussed. And what are we going to propose to the government? What are we going to propose to government? Has to give more money, for which government will have to find money, and government will have to generate revenue. There we have asked why the government would allow corporate houses to have all concessions in the name of revenue for. You know better, since the present government came to office, 7 lakh crores. That is what revenue foregone. And why it should happen? Why it should happen? Even if the corporate houses should not give up or share its profit. It is only for poor people to share everything and share the miseries, share the sufferings, but corporate houses will not share. So when you fiscal federalism, you will have to discuss such questions also. Otherwise, what is the meaning of discussing the fiscal federalism if we don't come to some conclusions and propose some concrete measures from the central government, from the state governments? This is what we will have to think. That is how I look at the issues, because other issues we keep discussing. We know what is happening in the country, and how we are taking public positions on issues. That is not the issue. Now we'll have to see that present government, I mean the union government, does meet the requirements of the state governments, particularly when the country is facing a pandemic crisis. This is what I think we should discuss.
Thank you. Thank you. Now, let me, I think, get back to a little perspective, because I think we're discussing very large issues and very fundamental issues, as well as very concrete and immediate issues. Now, as far as the large issue is concerned, and what Jairam raised, and what, I mean, all of us are concerned, you see, everyone is aware that Article 1 of the Indian Constitution says India, that is Bharat, is a union of states. Minus the states, there is no center. And this is a recognition that is unfortunately weakening in the consciousness of both political leaders as well as the people. Now that has to be brought back. There is a question of larger issue of federalism. In that context, fiscal federalism. Yes, we've been through all these issues, but the point at issue is that why is it coming under strain today? Why is this coming under another strain today, which is even apart from the COVID? Comrade Raja is correct. There was an economic crisis that was happening. It's not only slowdown. I'm sure, Jairam, you will agree with me that we were actually bordering on a recession before the COVID pandemic hit. State of the Indian economy. Now, after the pandemic, it is bound to be much, much worse. Now, what will be the final figures officially after all the doctoring that we announced in the fall in our GDP? Everybody, internationally, people are talking about, economists, that maybe we'll have actually a negative growth rate. If that is the case, what will be the devolution of resources for the states? Already very small, already very little. Now, fall further, continue to survive or meet their requirements. Now, these are very fundamental issues that need to be tackled. But right now, as I said, since the context, they said, well, what is the context in which we are of the COVID and what is the way forward? There, I think, if we confine ourselves to that issue,
Sita, I agree with you that the economy was a free fall even before this crisis.
Yeah.
Investment was sluggish. 6 consecutive quarters of GDP growth decline. Exports stagnant. And the atmosphere, fear and harassment that had gripped, tax terrorism. So, all these were pre-COVID crisis.
Exactly.
Now, of course, the Prime Minister has a perfect excuse for a negative GDP growth in 2021. He says, "मैं क्या करूं? ये COVID का नतीजा." They have a perfect excuse for that. At that point, I take that we have to recognize that even before the COVID crisis, the devolution to states was far lower than what was promised. If you look at the last 3 years data, even before the COVID crisis, it was not 42% as the Prime Minister very grandiloquently proclaimed. It was 31 to 32%. So even before the crisis, the economy was sputtering, and more importantly, devolution to states was far lower than what was recommended by the 14th Finance Commission and accepted by this government. I think the COVID crisis, of course, is going to accentuate the economic turmoil and the economic distress. And I don't think any section of society is going to be immune to the impact of this economic and financial crisis. Economists will argue, as they would continue to argue, whether this is going to be a V recovery, whether this will be a W recovery, what will be the nature of the recovery. I think, as people in the political arena, our priority should be to identify what are some of the short-term and what are some of the medium-term steps that can be taken. I think the state, we've had Manpreet, we've had Manish Sisodia, we'll have other finance ministers as well. And I think, we should not abdicate all thinking to the central government, because this government has, this government's policy is announce first, think later, So,
leave it to the center, it's a recipe for disaster.
Heads together and make demands from the central government, for steps. And fundamentally, I think the fundamental reason why the Gulati Institute, as I see it, has called this webinar is how do we bring back the strength, the fiscal capacity of the states, which was being eroded even before the COVID pandemic, and which is now being actually decimated in the name of the COVID pandemic. I think that's the real issue.
That is definitely. I agree. One minute, Raja. I agree here, Jairam. I mean, before Raja comes in, that COVID is now going to be the mother of all excuses for the Prime Minister. And then everything is going to be brushed under that carpet. But right now, as responsible political leaders, I mean, each one of us has certain things to answer to the people. And it's not merely accountability, it's not merely charity, it's a responsibility. How are you going to meet this challenge now? Is the way that we are meeting, is that adequate? I think it's completely inadequate. Unless we strengthen the state, it's just not possible for us to really succeed in this battle. Yes, Raja.
It is center which is abdicating its economic responsibilities, whereas it wants to keep all political powers in its hands. Center can announce lockdown, center can end lockdown, center can now financial emergency or economic emergency, center can decide all such things. But when it comes to devolution of funds and decentralization of economic powers, and how can we avoid questioning the center? As Jairam puts it, we are not putting everything on center and washing their hands. No, we agree states are having the responsibility of containing this virus on the ground. It is state which has to do everything. Center, what is the role of center? What is the role of center? There we raise certain questions related to economy. Yes. Powers, the fiscal federalism. That's what we are asking. And why can't government give more funds? I raise two things: this National Disaster Relief Fund, now PM CARE Fund. How the funds are given to the states. Now this 15th Finance Commission, what happened to its recommendation? Why funds are not given to the state governments? Now they are in dire need for money, the state governments, and state governments will have to face the people every day, passing need, and they cannot be left helpless. That's why we are asking the center should act fast, and the center should have with broad mind to share the whatever resources available with the center. It should come forward to share with the states. Otherwise, how to fight this pandemic? And you are talking about rapid testing, massive testing, and now there are reports these equipments are working, and the equipments which they proper are working. So how to face all these issues? How to face this kind of situation? That's why the economy is sinking into crisis. We all know it was sick even before Corona arrived in India. It was sick economy. But the economy was sick. But there were big business houses, corporate houses who were making money, who were plundering the natural resources as well as human power. And why can't government think of, all the time government thinks of taxing the poor people and putting burden, blame on the poor people. And government will have to think innovative, how to raise resources, how to generate funds. That's what I am pleading. And what are the ways to generate money? We all will have to sit together collectively. Government should respect the opposition party also.
As an
Tax the super rich. A 2% tax of the super rich today will give you much more than what is the fiscal package that the government has announced. I mean, this is something that everybody is talking of in the world today.
Yeah, I think
agree with me.
One thing is sure, that the neolibs discourse will not change as a result of this crisis. Neither will the discourse of the left.
No. What do you mean discourse of the left? It is there obviously to be seen.
But see, there are more serious things. I think one of the things that this crisis has shown is the complete hollowness of the so-called Gujarat model. You know, it was
That is true. That is true.
it was completely bogus to begin with. As a student of political economy, I mean, Kerala and Tamil Nadu's model have been far more superior, both in terms of economic growth and in terms of social development. And if you see what is happening today, the number of tests that have been done in Gujarat, you talked about testing. The number of tests that have been done in Gujarat are less than half that was done in Maharashtra, and and far lower than what it was done even in Tamil Nadu. Since you raised the issue of testing, the larger point, Sitaram, I was told since for 5 years I was a member of the Standing Committee on Health, so I've got some contacts, in the health bureaucracy. I was told that we are doing something like 39,000 to 40,000 tests daily right now. We have the capacity to increase this testing by 3 times. We can do 100,000 tests a day. We've got the wherewithal. Germany tested 1% of the population. South Korea tested about 1% of the population. Now, I was told very reliably that we can easily, with our existing wherewithal, increase our testing threefold to almost 100,000 a day. But the question really is, why aren't we doing it? The question that you asked. And the reason why we are not doing it is because I think the Prime Minister is afraid that, he won't be able to contain the fallout of this threat. You're coughing too much, Siddhanam.
It's a warning in COVID times, it's a warning.
Your point on testing is absolutely bang on. I mean, and I think the Prime Minister is shying away from the testing.
I don't know, Jairam, who's been telling you this, but yesterday ICMR said that even at the low levels of testing, we do not have the RNA kits which will last us for more than a week. No, the RNA extraction of the COVID virus, that is a vital first step in order to do the testing and get the confirmation. So, but whatever it is, I'm glad. If we have the capacity, I'm very glad. But why are you not?
We have the capacity for doing 100,000 tests a day, but we are not exercising that capacity.
Exactly. Because the less testing you do, you portray that you're the world leader, saying that in India we contain everything, because you're just not testing, just not showing. Why is the Kerala model today appreciated all over the world? Why is it there in the front pages of the Washington Post and New York Times and papers like that? And why is it, Jairam? Forget now our old argument of neoliberalism versus the left. But why is it, whether it is China or Cuba or Vietnam or South Korea or Singapore or Kerala, why is it that is most effectively implemented? They give the devil its due. It's the left, and it's that commitment and to the people.
In Kerala, it's left only once in 5 years, Sitaram. Don't take credit.
But in those 5 years, who makes the best of it?
There is a continuity.
And that 2.5 years of our 5 years always goes in undoing what the earlier 5 years did. So let's not enter into that argument. But the point is, Kerala, the foundations are such right from the 50s that whoever comes to the state government, they can't break the public. Why is it the public?
And so also in Tamil Nadu. So also in
system, that is non-negotiable in Kerala. Now, if it's possible in Kerala, why can't it be possible elsewhere? That's a larger question. You see that there are many other layers of this discussion on fiscal federalism. You see, supposing what you were talking about, Jairam, of the spread of hate and insecurity, and that has been growing, and after particularly 2019. Now, why is that happening? It's got an objective. The objective is to replace a secular democratic Republic of India by what they would call their Hindutva Rashtra, which my party program describes it as a fascistic agenda. Now, if you want that fascistic agenda to succeed, you require a unitary state, not a federal state. You require a unitary state structure where the concentration will have to be increasingly going into the center. Now that is the backdrop in which all this is happening. So you are discussing the nitty-gritties within the backdrop. But if you are discussing very correctly, Jairam, on the basis of the existing constitutional structure and thinking. But if that is going to be overthrown, then that discussion itself becomes absolutely, irrelevant. No, therefore there are layers of how we are.
Sitaram, I want to ask my friend Thomas Isaac, how is the Kerala CPM preventing you from coming to Parliament and raise questions?
I tell you, you always wait to get your things back. Yes, Raja is showing his finger very, very.
I agree with Jairam. Jairam has emphatically stated that Gujarat model has gone, it has failed, maybe in every respect. Now, Kerala model is being appreciated all over the world. And when I say this, not only in terms of how the Kerala government is doing all its best to contain the crisis, the pandemic, but the way the Kerala government handled the migrant workers crisis, it is fantastic. And Kerala has the largest number of migrant workers also. But Surat, what happened in Surat, Gujarat? That is why we are talking about the Kerala, how the Kerala government is performing, number one. Number two, Jairam always refers to this world debate, neoliberalism versus left. Now, the neoliberal structure, they cannot provide solutions to our financial problems or to face such a pandemic crisis. I am very frank with Jairam. Jairam knows me. So this is what this will, in the name of democracy, there is an attempt to dismantle democracy also. In India, we will witness not only neoliberal growth, we will witness neo-fascist growth, and your democracy will be throttled. Federalism, no debate on federalism or fiscal federalism or political federalism.
There will only be debate, no federalism.
I have to say one thing. I keep
expressing my apprehension.
Correct. Absolutely correct. But in the COVID pandemic, let me tell you, in the COVID pandemic, increasingly all over the world, what is the basic issue? Your public health. Universal public health care is a basic issue. Even countries like Spain, they have nationalized all private health facilities. Spain has announced today a basic minimum income, which will remain even after the pandemic is over. Now, what is this? If I say you do this, then you're anti-neoliberal.
There is no disagreement.
It's happening with all those countries.
If I remind you of the National Common Minimum Program of 2004, which the three of us participating in this debate, were involved in. And if you go back to the 1996 Common Minimum Program, the centrality of public investment in health had been recognized, very upfront. I have no disagreement with you. In fact, I would also say this. I keep sparring with you and Comrade Raja all the time. But I have to say that this COVID crisis has exposed the class character of Indian state and Indian society as nothing else. I mean, the fact that we are talking about bringing Indians back from abroad and not bothered about migrant labor within the country exposes all of us, collectively. I mean, this is completely shambolic. I've not heard the Prime Minister say anything. I've heard him say about students. I've heard him say about Indians abroad, patting himself on the back. But what the steps that have been needed to be done we are even dealing with students in quota, but we are not prepared to deal with problems of migrant labor. And I think that's the single biggest failure of the Indian state, broadly defined. Is it failure of Indian society as well, Sitaram? And there,
speak about NREG also.
There's another aspect.
You should speak about NREG.
I'd like to just add on to that. You see, there's also an excuse of trying to look at the scapegoat. Now, this entire Islamophobia that has been going on, I mean, it's evoked a global response and rejection, and that is going to affect federalism. How? Let me tell you. In a state like Kerala, if you disturb the communal amity here, then what is it that your set of policies is contributing except being anti-federal? Now, this is also a very important aspect. I mean, and there's not a word, not an effort by the government or the Prime Minister in order to contain this sort of a demonization of somebody because of using a very irresponsible event that happened. But then no questions on who permitted it, how were they people allowed to come from abroad, how did that happen? Now, all that is apart. But can that be the basis for demonizing an entire community? And can we succeed in our fight if we are divided like this? Only a united India with united people can succeed in this context of fighting the pandemic.
It's not just religious
It also affects the
it's also demonization
and state relations, I mean, not only with Kerala, but with a lot of other states in the country.
Excuse me. Can I have a comment?
Just suddenly, here.
Tom Isaac here.
Hello.
May I have a comment?
Yes, Sitaram.
Hello.
Sita, I
May
will
I have a comment?
Yes.
Is that Thomas Isaac?
Yeah,
Somebody wants to come in, Raja, 1 minute.
Is that Isaac speaking?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Is he going to answer my question on Sitaram?
No, actually. But I want to bring back to discussion a point you raised. Now, if there is any take home from Kerala's experience, there are two. The importance of public health system. And as Ramesh said, definitely Tamil Nadu has also robust public health system. So the problem is they have been a little late in starting on COVID. They are going to do well. But second one, perhaps is slightly unique to Kerala, is the robustness of the local governments. And in fact, that is a fulcrum around which the local level disaster management functions today.
Absolutely.
In fact, we are preparing a paper for EPW on precisely focusing on this. Now, I don't want to dilate on this, but I want to raise, since political leaders are here, an issue which was discussed in the previous session. There is a talk about a financial emergency in India, which I think is not just a dream. It is a real danger. Now, I would like to know the response to it, the political response to it. Now, I think that is a big danger to fiscal federalism in the federal structure of India itself, to have such an emergency today, fiscal emergency. So we would like all three of you to discuss about that.
Well, on this, Sitaram, I must say this point came up in the previous session. Hasib Drabu alluded to it. And I believe that my personal view, this has to be, of course, discussed as an official, but my personal view is that a declaration of a financial emergency would be completely detrimental to fiscal federalism. It would destroy whatever gains have been made in terms of financial and economic powers of state governments. I think what Thomas Isaac has raised is a live possibility. And as I said, for a prime minister who can unilaterally and thoughtlessly announce demonetization on the 8th of November 2016, announcing a financial emergency would not be alien to his character. But I think they should be resisted. There are ways of overcoming the current crisis. We can discuss that. We have talked about FRBM. We have talked about, other alternatives, postponing capital expenditure. But under no circumstances should the financial emergency provision should be invoked, because that would mean a complete redrawing of the political and financial architecture of India, which would be detrimental to our interests. This is my personal view.
Yes.
Shall-
Yes, Raja.
Can you see that? No, during the
This-
discussion, I myself referred to financial emergency. I said it is my strong apprehension. If that happens, I agree with Jairam. It will redraw the entire political and our entire governmental structures. And I may call it, it is no less than a political emergency, which is leading to a neo-fascist government and power in India. Already globally, people are talking about governments of strong men. Donald Trump is a strong man who is in power in America. Now here, our Prime Minister will be declared as a strong man. Already people declare him as strong man. He is under, everything is under command, in his command. So what will happen to democracy? Forget fiscal democracy or what will happen to democracy? Then the whole democracy will be at stake. And our whole task will be to defend democracy and save people and save the country.
I hope you
Yes,
are okay.
sir.
Now
I
it's
think,
your turn. My turn to ask you. I hope you are okay.
Before Comrade Churi,
I want to raise one more issue.
Isaac wants to
which
say
is
something.
important.
Jairam, 1
Which
minute.
is, you know,
Isaac wants to say
the
something.
Interstate Migrant Workers Act was a very important legislation. Now, the Interstate Migrant Workers Act has got subsumed in the labor code. And the importance of that act has been completely lost. But seeing what has happened in the last 3-4 weeks to the vast population of migrant workers, I think we must revisit this issue. And there is a very strong case now for having a separate standalone Interstate Migrant Workers Act and not having subsumed and get lost in the labor code. I think this is something that as political parties we must revisit.
Yeah, absolutely.
I think it's absolutely
We
right.
should speak about National Rural Employment. Jairam was the pioneer of National Rural Employment Guarantee Act in order to stop the migration of rural poor to the urban centers, cities. Now we are driving away migrant workers from urban centers to the villages, and they are all dying in
separate
hunger.
issue, Raja. But you remember, you're also part of that committee. The promise was that it will be extended to the urban employment guarantee. That did not happen. That's a separate issue. That's a separate issue. But Isaac wants to say something. I will hear him and then.
See, the one point responding to what Rameshji said, under the interstate migration and international migration are under the union list. So the entire responsibility for protecting them, ensuring they have food, they have accommodation, they have free transport, everything falls within the responsibility of the sender. In fact, they have done nothing. They have done nothing other than saying that SDRF may be used according to SDRF norms to support the migrant workers. Now, coming to financial emergency, what I'm afraid of is that this is going to institutionalize certain trends, arbitrary trends, which are already very visible. Say, union government unilaterally says, no, we can pay you compensation. It is in the law. Instead of saying, how do we give the compensation, they adopt a position that unless there is money, we can give you the money. They are giving advice to the Finance Commission to reduce the share of the states from 42%, which is already, as you said, below the 42%. Now, since that is not politically feasible, they are bringing a third claimant into the distribution defense. See, so there are these trends which are visible, cutting all the fiscal domain of the states, and therefore any declaration of financial emergency will be institutionalizing it.
Absolutely.
And therefore it should be resisted. Is a major danger that's lurking behind this pandemic.
Absolutely. Absolutely. I mean, there's no doubt about it, Isaac, that financial emergency will be the ushering in of a totalitarian regime. And it will completely kill or completely stifle any degree of federalism that you have, not only fiscal federalism, but entirely federalism as a result of this financial emergency. This has to be resisted. And that resistance will have to come particularly from political parties which have state governments and which finally come in defense of upholding a constitution. Now, if you can waive write-off loans, what they say of the NPAs, in cumulatively for the last 5 years, I mean, the figure has come out 7.76 lakh crores. That is the amount of that is officially being announced of the NPAs. You then say financial emergency. Where is all this money that should have been collected, not collected? Raja pointed out of the tax foregone. Now, in addition to that, what you're writing off, where is this emergency? If you stop your crony capitalism, there is no financial crunch. There is no dearth of resources in our country. It's only the dearth of policies of how you use those resources. I mean, you can celebrate, Jairam saying when greatness of neoliberal policies, the number of Indian multi-billionaires has increased. May increase, but the point at what expense of the people and what expense of the poor and the marginalized. Now you're squeezing them further. Now, even before this COVID, your abysmal record of human development indices in the country. Now, with this COVID, I mean, just look at it. How many lakhs of children have lost their vaccination, so crucial for the rest of their lives? Have lost out on getting vaccination. Lakhs and lakhs of children. Pregnant women who are delivering, they are giving birth to the future of India.
And midday meals also.
On vaccinations before their delivery, which is of absolute crucial importance to the health of the child. 3.5 lakh diabetes patients have not been able to get medical attention. More than 1 lakh cancer patients have not been able to get their normal attention because of this entire preoccupation with the COVID campaign. I mean, COVID pandemic. Yes, this is important to tackle this pandemic, but you cannot have non-COVID deaths because of other things, and you say he has comorbidities, therefore he died. He was alive with the comorbidities before COVID came. If he's died now, it's not because of his comorbidity. He died because of COVID. Stop making it. So, coming back to the question of fiscal federalism, there's something that all of us will have to resolutely oppose. And I think there's no basis for it. And secondly, this is an excuse to actually establish an authoritarian regime. The London Observer yesterday has, not yesterday, day before I think, has brought out, a write-up on all the countries which are ruled by right-wing in a dictatorial style, including India and Prime Minister Modi, the top of. Of course, the icing in the cake of that is Donald Trump. His latest being injecting with the disinfectants and phenyl and all that to fight this COVID. But whatever that may be. But the question is that even these countries are giving out huge amount of bailout packages. In India, you're not. Where is your reasons for your financial emergency? It's not finances, it's political. That is something we all have to recognize. For advancing a political agenda, you will say financial emergency, and that is the way of a complete control over the country and changing of our constitutional order, which we have today. And that is the real danger. That's why it has to be resolutely opposed. What do you say, Raja?
Yes, I made it clear. We should oppose financial emergency. We should oppose any emergency for that matter. No, that's one to how to overcome this crisis. How to overcome this crisis? with the long-term perspective, immediate perspective. The immediate thing is we should fight that center should give adequate funds to the state governments. Center should do this. This is immediate. The long term, I can appeal to Jairam, also our friend. We need not visit Marxist thoughts of economy or economic policies of Marx or anybody. Let us really say to the economic thoughts of Ambedkar. What Ambedkar said, public health, education, employment, housing, all this must be the fundamental rights of our people. And the state shall ensure all means of livelihood for all our citizens. How we can do this? That will be our bigger challenge, for which we all will have to come together.
Raja, you're drawing up the ground for being a part of another common minimum program, is it?
Yeah?
Yeah. Grounds for drafting another common minimum program. Huh?
Jairam.
No, excuse me, I'm not going to argue or request for a common minimum program. But in the morning we were discussing, independently, the finance ministers have been writing, there is no difference between state governments regarding the demands. One, the GST compensation. Two, raising the fiscal deficit ceiling. Three, additional grant. Now, I don't think there will be any difference of opinion regarding the income transfer, which Comrade Sitaram elaborated, income transfer. And I think it is possible to work out a package for MSME and the farmers. See, it is important that the opposition parties and so on bring out not common minimum program, but a program how to meet this challenge, and not leave it to the central government with weird thinking. I mean, it makes no economic sense at all what is being done in India today. Absolutely. I have not seen anybody rationally, coherently saying this is the rationale of the action being taken. So it is important that in this India, that program, not alternative and so on, but for the pandemic, what is to be done, put forward.
Yeah.
Rather than leave to ad hoc decisions and declarations. I don't know why the political parties in India is hesitating to do that.
Hesitation. The question of coming, right, you're absolutely right. The time has come where the political parties will have to get together, all those who are committed to saving this order that we have in our constitutional order, and to actually meet and solve the problems of the people. A need to put our heads together by the political parties. You're absolutely right. The left has always been wanting it. We are urging them even now. Even now, we have been saying that all those who are committed to the order, let us move jointly. Let us move jointly. Even now, even for this webinar, I wish there are many more finance ministers who should have participated, because they have written what Isaac said is absolutely right. They have written independently the same things we are talking about now. And since this is a common issue before all the states, I think that will only happen if the political leadership. The political leadership displays that sort of a commitment. And they, as the biggest opposition party, I don't know if Congress, if we can have this webinar of finance ministers of the state, I'm sure we can have one of the political leaders in the country who are committed to our constitutional order and who are committed to improving the welfare of our people. I mean, a discussion among the opposition parties is absolutely necessary. And there, Isaac is right. The political leadership will have to give that direction. And we can't really say that unless the political leadership gives that direction, even the states where they have their governments will not respond. And that is what we are seeing. I mean, that needs to be corrected immediately. That's my opinion. I don't know, Jairam, what you think about it.
I agree with you. The political initiatives of like-minded parties, should be taken, and we should bring, because I think the points that Thomas Isaac has been talking about has support, across the spectrum. I'm sure Amit Mitra will agree. I'm sure the finance minister of Telangana will agree, the finance minister of Andhra will agree, the finance minister of Bihar will also agree. I don't see any reason why. I mean, on these issues that we are talking about. And the only thing I would add to what Thomas has said, that the common program should have what should be done, it should also have a section on what should not be done. And number one in what should not be done is the declaration of a financial
emergency.
because if that gets declared, then all that we are suggesting is of academic value. So first thing, we have to start the common program by saying what should not be done, and then go on to say what should be done.
Correct, agree. Let us together then move a motion for an amendment to the constitution to remove that danger of a financial emergency. Jairam, would you agree?
Sorry?
Would you agree for a constitutional amendment to remove that danger of a financial emergency declaration?
Well, I think we should seriously consider. I mean, we should seriously consider it. And, as I said, Thomas Isaac and his colleagues in Kerala should bring you into parliament so that you can pilot the amendment.
You raised the point in the morning, and the threat is really real. A statement by the political leadership in India. This is a danger, it should be kept out. Then things which are common, which everybody agrees about, even BJP state governments, in fact, Sushil Kumar Modi agreed with all this. He has a written note to the GST Council.
Yes.
Every finance minister you ask, they will say the same thing. But, don't allow these things to drift. And central government declares one thing after another sometimes. No, there should be a position made out by the state government, majority of the state governments in India. Majority of the state governments in India, it can be done. And the political parties. Regarding pandemic, leave the other things out. Regarding the pandemic.
Agreed. Isaac, that's exactly what I'm saying. You see, many of the finance ministers of the states would agree in private. Many have told me also in private that absolutely correct. What you're raising is correct. But then they won't raise it officially or formally till their political parties are all give the direction. Yeah, that is the Indian reality.
Comrade Sridharam, unless you agree, can I speak? Therefore, you political leaders could come together.
Of course, I give you greater freedom than what they give to their people. But the point is, Jairam, this is something we'll have to take it up seriously politically. We'll have to seriously take it up. I mean, apart from, you see, there is no point right now in petty quarrels. I mean, they'll go on happening. I mean, that will continue, and they should happen. That is the strength of our democracy. So, because I'm opposing somebody in one state, therefore I won't go in the other state. That is not the issue. The much larger issue concerning the country. If the country is not safe, neither you nor I will be safe. But that is what the Congress party should also, I would appeal them to actually understand this and therefore come on board on actually taking up this challenge right now that we are facing. And I think that is an important thing. So Raja, we already spent nearly one and a half.
I have nothing to add. I have nothing to add. I endorse what my great friend Jairam has said. All like-minded parties must get together and look for people. What are the dangers the country is facing, and what we have to do, and what are the tasks before us? That's what I find, and you also agree.
Yeah, correct.
We'll take few questions on the chat.
We have a number of something like 40 comments, 42 comments oblique questions. I think we have
few of them.
Few. Sanjay Baru online. He says that effects of financial emergency. He says that during financial emergency, the executive authority of the center expands and it can give financial orders to the state according to its own. I mean, essentially in sync with what the panel has been saying about. Then we have here Perimal Valinganam. from the perspective of present experience, it is necessary to strengthen the local bodies of India. It means that local governments to be given more financial powers, what Jairam Ramesh remarked in the morning. Anita and Joe Jacob would like to ask Professor Thomas Isaac, could you please throw light upon the issues and challenges in monetizing debt? Then we have there is Prashant Pongupati. There exists no scope for raising taxes at this point of time. Cut mega capital. This is actually said by the panelists in the morning. Cut mega capital projects. Then there are comments like COVID special tax should be levied on the corporate rich. This is what repeat of what Sanjay Baru Sahab said. Then we have Surendra Rendra. Panchayats are again talking about strengthening panchayats and local bodies. There are scholars like I would like Shraddha, Arindam Banerjee, Vijay Bhatt, Das Amarendra. You know, what one set of questions talks about, are there going to be the inflationary implications of extra financial funding and financialization of debt and other things and borrowing? Shari Kumar from Cochin University, it is wise to raise tax rate to raise additional revenue. So okay. I cannot afford to kind of read up everyone. There are so many of them. Can the state do book adjustments against GST share supposed to be received from the center? Can the state spend against the share of or withhold any payment? This is another question by Sneha Shah. Nilancha Acharya, can the panelists throw light on what is wasteful expenditure? If it is all wasteful, how can the legislators allow it to happen? These kind of questions are there. So now, true, I am talking about short-term to resource demand. International oil prices are also low. Now also this may be an opportunity because, so this is, that's another question. So I think, I must say that there are a number of comments, feedback, and a few questions, which most of them are in sync with, and there are a few questions which I think the panelists would like to kind of,
And a final round of comments.
Yeah.
Yeah. I think most of the questions, opinions that have come, please thank all of them on our behalf also, because I think they are in tune with the type of discussion that we. And it is very true. The question, we go into many of these issues, but let us see when the final comments come, because wasteful expenditure depends on how do you define waste.
Line got cut. Line got. They are sitting in the same group. They are sitting in the same.
Summarize it, because I think we've taken more time than the 1 hour, 15 minutes that was given to us. So, Jairam, would you begin?
No, I think very important point that has been made by Thomas Isaac and others, including you, is that in addition to state governments interacting amongst themselves and state governments interacting with the central government, political parties who are concerned about the future redrawing of the architecture of the Indian polity, both from a fiscal point of view and from an administrative point of view, have to get together. It's a very good suggestion. Sitaram has influence cutting across political parties. Maybe he should take the initiative along with others. But I agree that, the threat that we have to fiscal federalism is not purely a fiscal threat. It's also a political threat. It has political dimensions, ramifications for our democracy. And as political parties, we must be concerned about it. And dialogue must take place now. Just as, we are having this dialogue. I hope I'm here not as a political personality, but as somebody, who's got pretensions to being a quasi-academic or a quasi-scholar. but a pseudo academic or a pseudo. But I think initiative among political parties is absolutely essential, and I think we should take this forward.
Thanks, I agree. And I will, of course, make the effort, but require help also from all of you that in order to make this into a joint effort. Yes, Raja?
We all should try fiscal federalism. We all should oppose fiscal emergency. And in fact, our party has suggested corporate houses. Let us see in the coming days how things can be discussed for generating fund and generating revenue. And I hope whatever Comrade Thomas Isaac has said, that the parties must get together and act together in the interest of the country and its future.
Yes. Thank you, Raja. Thank you, Jairam. And thank you.
Thank you, comrade.
Thank you, Gulati.
Okay,
I just one minute. You see, I think since the session has been titled as saying what is the way forward. The way forward here is at least on 3 issues where there is a large agreement between finance ministers all across the board, including the ruling BJP. One, you pay the GST dues. Second, increase the borrowing limit, borrowing ceiling, FRMB or whatever it is in the present context to meet the current crisis. Third, release funds to the states in order to meet this challenge, and that huge funds, I would only personally add that what you're collecting in the PM cares or whatever they call it, that private trust fund should all be transferred to the state governments so that this pandemic can be effectively met. Then the other issue on which I think there's been a general agreement and consensus is that financial emergency is something we'll have to resiliently oppose. And that is something, it is, as I said earlier, it is not merely going to be confined to financial emergency, but that is the manner in which totalitarian order will be legitimized in our country, and that is something that is not acceptable. And finally, yes, let us all put our efforts together to try and get all the well-meaning political forces who are today ready now to ensure that first we meet this pandemic, resolve the problems before our own brethren who are today suffering, which we discussed earlier, and on further to strengthen and safeguard our existing constitutional order from greater assaults. So on this, let us all politically.
Can I just add one very brief point? Yeah. One very brief point. You see, it's not necessary to declare a financial emergency. You can carry out the actions without declaring an emergency. So, the declaration of a financial emergency empowers the central government, but this central government is taking over those powers on its own, so without declaring. I think that's very important. An undeclared financial emergency is far more pernicious than a declared financial emergency.
Exactly, and an undeclared emergency is far more pernicious than a declared one. I mean, along with this sort of atmosphere of hatred and violence that is accompanies that. So anyway, so let us all try and pool our efforts to persuade the political parties who are willing today to come together on these issues. And what Sanjay Baru said in his comment of saying that it empowers the executive, and what Jairam has clarified just now, even without declaration, you can assert the powers of a financial emergency, which is what is exactly happening now. That has to be resisted. So therefore, I think on these aspects, what I've said, let there be that let us decide and conclude this session with saying that immediately these 3 points, that is GST, dues to be paid back, increase the borrowing limits, and third, liberally finance the states to meet the desert, and to fight against the usurping of financial authority by the center. And on this, that let us all try to take the movement forward and try to bring the political forces together. So to the Gujarati Institute and to the government of Kerala and to the Finance Minister, our thanks for giving us this opportunity. And thank you, as always, Ram and Raja. And thank you, Isaac, for giving us. Yes, if the host would like to have the final word before closing, you would like to say?
I think on behalf of the Gujarati Institute and all my colleagues, and of course on behalf of all the people who are now online watching you, we would like to thank you, the panel, for such a highly encouraging scenario. That means, notwithstanding the political difference, today there is an enormous scope for working together to address this and truly upholding the democratic values and the fiscal federalism of the country. This is a very optimistic and positive note that this panel has come up with, and we cannot thank you more, Sri Sitaram Yechury for moderating this session and coming up with very insightful and pointed conclusions. And I must say that Sri Jairam Jameshji was here today as the professor. First time he has kindly agreed to our offer to be the honorary professor of Gujarati Institute, and this is a formal welcome. And yeah, he is the honorary professor of gifts, which has agreed. So you are not a pseudo academic, you are a true academic, and we know that you are more than 100 professors. That is, with that recognition that we offer, we wanted you to be with us. Thank you very much, and as always, D. Raja, Sri D. Raja was very kind enough to join us, and your insightful remarks and pointed interventions and highly insightful remarks and ideas will be a very important guiding point for us. And with this optimistic note and encouraging note, I would like to thank you once again. And for those who are online, I would like to announce that by around 5:15, Dr. Thomas Isaac will be trying to answer all the questions and a further interaction online or otherwise with the questions which are being posed. And don't feel discouraged. All those who are online, please stay back and we will be responding to and Dr. Thomas Isaac is with us. He will be sitting all throughout the day with us. He's not going to leave from here. Thank you very much. Okay. Please go home and you are at home only, have your lunch. Sorry that we cannot offer you lunch.
The Gujarati Institute is going to give all the online visitors online lunch.